First, I will introduce myself. My name is Laetitia Avrot. If you can't say it correctly, it's perfectly normal because it's not an easy name to say for non-Latin people. So I'm fine with whatever name you want. Joy is a good translation of what Laetitia means. You might find out that my slides are quite clean. Why? Because I'm a mom. And as a mom, I'd like to be listened to when I talk. And I found out that when there were bullet points on the slide, people were reading it instead of listening to me. But I was objected that some people might have trouble following conf talk if there is no bullet point or no word at all on the slide. So if you want what I call the annotated slides, you will find them on my blog, mydbanotebook.org. You will find a conf talk tab there, and you will have a direct links to the annotated slides with more words than what we will have here and what I will present. You will also see the slides link on my Twitter account at L_Avrot. And it's my personal account. I try to keep it professional and speak about databases, Postgres, and so on, but it's the internet, so you might find unicorns, cats, kittens, and things like that, because that's the internet. And now, who I am, I work at EDB as a field CTO, and I'm a PostgreSQL recognized contributor, and I'm also the founder of Postgres Women, a group that helps women going into the database world and Postgres world, and that helps also to make women already there step into the light. So today we will be talking about my tool, Pglog. So the name is not eccentric, but it says what it does. So I'm fine with it. We will have 3 points, very simple. The first will be why. Why would you use such a tool where already written tools can analyze Postgres logs? The second will be how, and the third one will be what. So, why I would want to reinvent the wheel? Actually, I was very frustrated with existing tools. When you want to work on a subset of data, when there was some production failure, for example, it means you have to feed the tool, the existing tools, with a subset of the data you want to analyze. And then you will find out that you can make it better by using another subset, a smaller subset of the logs, but it means you will have to refeed a new file to the tool. The tool can't, on the fly, change the time window that it's analyzing, which was very frustrating for me. And the other thing is the standards tool only provides standards data. The tool has no idea what you're gonna find out in the logs. And sometimes, and either you don't know what you will find, but when you find something, you might want to go deeper into that specific point, but the existing analyzing tools won't allow you to do that. So, for example, you might want to analyze what's going on when there are production peaks. Because maybe during production peaks, you have performance issue you don't have when it's the middle of the night and nothing's happening. And for example, you might want to see how the checkpoints are occurring during production peaks, and maybe your production peaks only happen for 5 minutes in a day. But you might want to customize your checkpoint for these 5 minutes. And another thing I found very frustrating is the work mem setting. You know that when Postgres is running out of work mem, it will swap which is very horrible for performance. And so you might want to analyze in depth what's going on with the temporary files so that you can find out a best setting either for 1 or 2 sessions or either for your complete instance, or more probably for both. So my thought was, if only I could use SQL to query my logs. And then I was like, wait a minute, it's already in the Postgres documentation. If you look at the Postgres documentation where CSV formatting logs is explained, they explain how to create a table to upload data, Postgres logs data. And then if you look at the file foreign data wrapper, the example given is using Postgres log from CSV format to perform SQL on top of Postgres log being written dynamically. So it was already there. I just had to wrap that up in an extension. And so I did. So first, never use Pglog in production. That's not what it's meant to do. It's a cold analysis tool, so it needs to be installed on a non-critical production server to analyze your critical production server logs, or on your laptop or desktops also. It's a very simple extension, and normally everything you need is explained in the README file. In the annotated slides, you will have the link to the README file. And finally, I added a Dockerfile option, so you don't even need to have Postgres on your computer. So what do you need? You need a computer, either a server, a laptop, a desktop, whatever, and a PostgreSQL version 11 or newer. Version 11 because I use stored procedures, so it was added only with Postgres 11. You will need Pglog project code, and you will need some log to analyze. The logs can be analyzed from Postgres version 9.0, because the CSV formatting structure changed in Postgres 9.0, and I didn't think it was worth it adding support for Postgres version older than Postgres 9.0. If you think it's worth it, you're welcome to do it, but I will really encourage you to migrate to a newer version of Postgres. If you don't want to install Postgres on your laptop, which is perfectly fine, you can use the Pglog's Docker file. It will install Postgres on a Docker with the extension already there. Because that's how I do it, I created a database called Laetitia, where the extension is a tile. You're welcome to change the Docker file to have another name if you want. And of course, you will still need Postgres log to analyze when using a Docker file. So, how to use it? Again, not in production. It's really important to me that you don't mess up your production server because of my tool. Your production is really important, and you really don't want to mess it up with some really heavy queries, analytics queries on huge tables. You can analyze Postgres logs from Postgres 9, and your logs need to be formatted in CSV mode. So, about settings. The first thing is you need log destination to be CSV log. As log destination CSV log, you will have to put logging collector to on. Of course, if you're already using rlog or syslog, you can use a log destination using the separate formats you want, comma separated. And then you will need enough details in your log to be able to find out what's going on. By default, Postgres is really sparse on details of what's going on. So my advice is, even though you're not using the tool, just put the maximum information you can, because when you will have a production problem, it will be too late to change your log settings. So what I advise normally is using log mean duration statements of 250 milliseconds for transactional workload. For decisional workload, normally I say between 1 and 5 seconds. Depending on the query you have, maybe with 1 second you will have a lot of them. Even on transactional workload, maybe with 250 milliseconds you will have a lot of them. My advice then is to put it higher, fix the slow queries, and then get it down so you can reach the 250 milliseconds for transactional workload. And the log autovacuum mean duration, I like seeing all my autovacuum. So that's why I put it to 0. And checkpoints to on to see all your checkpoints. You will want that, seriously. And I like seeing the connection disconnections. Most of the time, it's just to prove to the customers that they need a connection puller. So I put log connections to on and log disconnections to on. It's also a good thing from security purpose, because then you can audit and find out that there was a connection with that login from that computer. And also log weights to on, because you want to see in your logs if there are some logs. And the last one, my favorite, log temp files to 0. You want to see all your temp files so that you can have meaningful statistics about them. And setting the work mem, it's hard. It will change with the time because your database will change, but that's the most rewarding thing you will see, because when you will change the setting and you will see the time of the duration of the query going from 1 second to 10 milliseconds, even the customer will think you're a wizard. So I like being a wizard, so that's why I do it. The extension will create a Pglog table. It's a partition table, partitioned by files. As I said, we're using CSV format files, and there are two, there is a Boolean that you can activate or deactivate. If you put it to true, that Boolean is called materialized, and it will copy the data into your database, into your table. But if you don't copy it, it will use in a file data wrapper. You might need the contrips package to have the file data wrapper extension, because my extension will cascade install the file data wrapper extension. And when you will drop the Pglog extension, I suggest adding the cascade option to drop the file data wrapper extension if it's not used anymore. You can describe the Pglog table using \d in PSQL or whatever you like with your SQL client, but I'm a PSQL fan, so I will show how PSQL does that. So there are way more columns than that. But I tried to pick the most significant ones you would want to look at. The first one is the log time, because that's an important information. But keep in mind that the log time is relevant to the time zone of the server. So you might need that information too to find out what time zone the server is running on. Then you might want to filter your logs on the username. Keep in mind that for some logs, messages, the username will be null, because for some messages, it's not relevant to have a username. For example, database server started is not relevant to have a username. And then a database name, again, it can be null. Then you have the session ID and the session line num. These two needs to be used together because sometimes a message log has several lines, and you will be able to combine them using the session ID. And you might be interested in the session start time and find the difference with the log time. So you can, in a way, find that this session is running since a long time. And then you have the error severity. Error severity is depending on how you set it. You will have panic. Well, panic is interesting, but normally it means that Postgres crashes. So that's interesting, but you won't have a lot of details after that. Fatal is really interesting because it's not crashed yet, but you're in serious trouble. Error, warning, if info and hint or details. And then you will find the query if it's relevant, again, if there was a query. And what's new with Postgres 14, you will have a query ID so that you can group by query ID to find out what's going on with that particular query when it's repeated over the time. I still haven't implemented yet the usage of query ID, but I will very quickly because it's not difficult to do. So how do you create the Pglog table? As I said, once you have installed the extension, the Pglog table does not exist, but you have a bunch of stored procedures that can create them. Stored procedure can be called using the call SQL command. The first one is to create the Pglog table out of a single file. So you just give it the file, the directory, version of Postgres. It's not the version of your current Postgres, it's the version of the Postgres log. And then the schema where you want it to be added, and the famous materialized Boolean. What I do, or what I did, because I was a consultant database before, I created a schema for each customer so that I had a schema per customer with the Pglog table for each customer. So I just had to switch the search path to switch customer. Because you know how customers are, they send emails, they phone, and you have to find quickly the answer to the question. So that's for a single file. And if you're using CSV format and you're using materialized to false, then you will be able to add new data to your CSV file, and it will be into the queryable directly from the database, which is very nice. And then you can create it from a whole directory, which is what I do normally, because normally my customers don't give me only one file. They give me a whole tar directory with all the files into it. So that's why I created this query, this procedure. It will do the exact same thing. You just give the directory version of Postgres log, and if you want the schema where you want it imported, and the materialized Boolean. If you have several files, then the Pglog table will be partitioned by file. So make sure your files it will be partitioned on the log time. So you need to be sure that you don't have a part of a file with the log time of another file and things like that, because partitioning won't work in that way. You need to have really a fine distinction between partitions on log time. So after I've done that, so the call will create the Pglog table. It will also create views, or if you use the materials Boolean to true, it will create materials views. That's what I call the standard reports. That's where I begin when I have an audit to do, or when I don't know what's going on. And the first thing I do normally is looking at the repartition of error logs. So you will see my examples are quite weak because I couldn't use actual customer logs into a presentation because there's confidential information. So I used mine, but that's not production database log, so it's not so interesting. But what I do normally is I look at the level of errors and the number of errors. So we see here that I had a certain number of fatal errors and then errors, and most of the messages were log messages. When I've done that, I know that I can get deeper with SQL. How do I do that? Using \d+, you will have the SQL for the view, actually. And so you will be able to add a where clause. So you can restrict your report on an amount of time, on a database name, or things like that. Here's what I did. I decided to add a condition because I wanted the log time being between the 3rd and the 4th of December. And I wanted the database name to be Laetitia. So that you can filter here really easily just by looking at the database, the view SQL, and editing it. What I do also is when I find message of fatal or error level, I compute another report, which is, the name of the report is error, analyze, and the level messages. So here it's for fatal, and you find out that you had 2 terminating connection due to administrative command. We can, that's kind of normal. And connection to client lost. So as we have just a few of them, we are probably safe. You might find bad passwords here. To me, that's a really important message and needs to be investigated because you might have a security issue. And after analyzing panic fatal errors, normally I go to autovacuum. So I computed here. As you see, it's not very interesting here because it's not production data. But what you can see is the number of vacuum and the number of analyze for several tables, and it's automatic vacuum and automatic analyze. And you can get the 5 or more rows concerning the tables that use the more autovacuum resources. Normally, not there, but normally in a standard production system, you might want to tune autovacuum for those tables because the default of Postgres are really conservative of autovacuum settings. So you will want to make them better. And you can, of course, customize the report. As I say, again, you will use \d+, get the SQL of the view, and then add a where clause. For example, here, it would have been some meaning to not view autovacuum report on the PG catalog tables. Or not. Maybe you are interested in it. I had a customer who had a performance issue due to bloat in his catalog, PG catalog, because he had too many objects in his database. So it can happen. That's why first I issue the report without filter, and then after I can go deeper with filters. Checkpoints. So I created checkpoint statistics, but that's not very that's not the most important unless you have the same workload every day, which is never the case. But you might want to have average frequency and median frequency. I've did some statistics at college, and I know that an average does not mean anything unless you have a median with it. So that's why I always display the median with the average. So you have the frequency, and you have the duration, which can be important too, because you don't want your checkpoints to overlap. But you can get deeper, because here is as a result a report to get the statistic by hour, so that you can check which are the most busy hours. And once you've done that, I really encourage you to get this view SQL and change it to get the data per minute on the 1 or 2 couple hours of high workload, so that you can even get deeper. I didn't write the report here. I could, but it's just changing hours to minutes in a query, so it shouldn't be difficult to anyone. Then my favorite, the temp file report. So I use the \jx. I don't know if you're familiar too, but it's a way to show the data in rows instead of columns when you have a lot of columns. It's really useful. That's specific to PSQL. It probably won't work in your in another SQL client. And by the way, if you're very interested in features like that in PSQL, I wrote a blog post, well, a website called psql-tips.org, where you will find, I think I'm now up to 150 tips about PSQL. It's not finished. I estimate that I should have between 300 and 400 tips at the end. So I'm not there yet. So you see here that what I give is the minimum, the maximum size of the temp files, the global average, but as I said, it's not really interesting, an average, because you consider distribution. And the median was not enough too for temp files. That's why I decided to go with this style. So you will have, for example, the first 10%, it means that less than 10% of the query used 5,720 megabytes. And same for 20s, etc. Normally, I try to aim to set the work mem to the 80%, meaning that more of the 80% data queries won't need temp files anymore. But here you see that 80% is 142 gigabytes, which is not something you want to set to your work mem too. That's why you want to look at the queries, so that after that, so here you have the top queries, and you see that it's a stored procedure that will load the Pglogs. That's why it created so much, it used so much temp files. And you can, after that, use the query ID to exclude those queries and run again the temp file report, so that you will have excluded exceptional values, and you will have better statistics on what's going on. Then you might be interested in slow queries. You have a lot of information on slow queries in Postgres. I tried to use regular expression to kind of normalize the queries. That's why you will have things like here, a question mark, because that was a constant value that I changed for a question mark, so that I can group by my queries. It will be easier with the query ID. And again, you have the average and the median time, but here it does not mean anything because it was run only once. That's the query I show to my customers when I want to explain to them they need a connection pooler. Because I will see the mean duration and the max duration and average duration of my sessions. If it's very low, it means they're creating connections all the time. And as I explained earlier on my other talk, as Postgres will have to fork the postmaster process each time there's a new connection, it will take some resources from the OS, and the OS might not be able to keep up. I had the problem with a customer, actually. And then as you can go deeper by adding information about the frequency and the connection number for each database. And of course, for the session stats, you can remove administration access, you can focus on your application database, you can focus only on one user if you want, things like that. And you can also create aggregate by users if you want. That's the beauty of SQL. It's really flexible, and that's what I was trying to achieve, so that's fine. So, what really matters? It's not the views that I already wrote, and of course you can suggest me other views to add, but what really matters is you can write your own SQL. And as SQL is Turing complete, you should be able to get everything you want out of your logs from an SQL query. Your system is really unique with its own unique problems, and when you arrive in a new system, you have no idea what you will be facing. And you might want to have a global view, that's the standard report, and after that you will be able to go deeper and find really where is the problem, understand what's happening, and when you understand what's happening, you should be able to fix it. Or at least to explain what's happening, because sometimes you don't have the budget to fix it because you find out that the hardware is or the VM is not dimensioned correctly, and you need more resources, and sometimes you can't be granted that. But it means you can say, okay, here's the problem, here's a solution, here's another, and if someone says, no, we won't apply any solution, you can say, okay, so we will just keep going with this problem. It means that you say that the performance issue is not really an issue, or things like that. And it's perfectly fine. You just have to make people aware that not doing anything, it's a choice that they make. It's not the default choice. It's a choice that they make, and it costs money too. And yes, I really encourage you to craft your own queries. And as I said, you're welcome to submit your ideas. I will be very happy to add them. And so if you want to play with it, you can go to my GitLab. My GitLab name is the same as my Twitter account, L_Avrot. And the name of the project is Pglog. You won't find it on PGXN because I don't want it to be installed on production. It's really something you have to compile on your laptop if you want to clone the source code, or to use a Docker file, to have it on a Docker safely sandboxed on your environment. Okay, so I guess we'll wrap it up, and if you have questions you don't want to ask publicly, I'm available.